Ma'am, for the third time, we do not understand you. The concierge's voice was tight eyes darting toward the crowd beginning to gather near the marble reception desk. The Japanese woman in the navy blue coat stood motionless. Her hands were clasped politely in front of her, but her eyes, sharp, unreadable, scanned the growing tension like a general surveying a battlefield. Behind her, an assistant in a dark suit frantically tapped at his phone. Two translators whispered in the background, red-faced and helpless. "Should we call security?" one staff member muttered behind the desk. "She's not being aggressive," another whispered, "but she won't respond to anything in English, French, or Mandarin. And she's booked in the presidential suite, for heaven's sake." From the far end of the lobby, near the gleaming brass luggage carts, Elliot Barnes watched silently as he polished the edge of a glass table. His gray janitor's uniform blended into the surroundings like wallpaper by design. People didn't see janitors. That was part of the job, especially in a place like the Royal Grand Hotel, where luxury was measured not just in marble, but in who was allowed to be heard. The hotel manager, Veronica Hale, descended the grand staircase like she was stepping onto a Broadway stage. Her stilettos clicked sharply on the polished floor, her crimson lipstick a beacon of manufactured control. "Good morning," she said with theatrical calm, placing both hands on the reception counter. "I'm the general manager here. How may we assist you, Miss—" The Japanese woman didn't respond. Miss Veronica repeated firmer this time. Still nothing. Veronica turned, giving her staff a forced smile. "She's refusing to speak. This is unacceptable." The murmurs grew louder. From where he stood, Elliot felt the shift in the room's air, something deeper than confusion. Contempt disguised as customer service. Fear masquerading as professionalism. Veronica leaned toward the guest and said slowly, like addressing a misbehaving child, "This is America, ma'am. If you want service here, you need to speak English." A pause. Then, softly but unmistakably, the woman exhaled. A single, quiet breath. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate, measured. And Elliot felt a chill slide down his spine. The assistant stepped forward nervously. "She's not being difficult. She prefers to communicate in her native language for formal matters." Formal Veronica laughed, shaking her head. "We're not in Tokyo. If she wants to order towels or champagne, she can point like everyone else. But she's blocking the check-in line." Elliot placed the cloth back on the janitor's cart and moved slowly toward the commotion. He didn't know why his feet were walking. They just were. Something in the woman's eyes, he couldn't name it, but he recognized it. It was the look of someone being measured in a currency they never agreed to use. Veronica waved to a uniformed guard nearby. "Escalate this to management security." The woman's assistant stepped between them, alarmed. "Please, she's not causing harm. She's one of the most respected executives in Japan." "She's delaying service in a 5-star hotel," Veronica snapped. "We don't have time for guessing games and silent treatment." The woman's hand twitched ever so slightly, then returned to stillness. Her silence was not weakness. It was a blade. That's when Elliot stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said. Everyone turned. Veronica blinked. "Mr. Barnes, this doesn't concern maintenance." "I know," he said simply. He turned toward the guest, offered a slight bow, almost imperceptible but just right, and said in soft, fluent Japanese, "Ocha wo itpai ikaga desu ka? Zaitung yang ocha. O ippai ikaga desu ka? Saito-sama, would you care for a cup of tea?" Miss Saito time stopped. Even the lobby's piano music, piped in softly through ceiling speakers, seemed to fade. The woman's eyes widened, not dramatically, not with surprise, but with the slow dawning recognition of being truly seen. She said something in Japanese, quiet and melodic. Elliot nodded. He gestured toward the lounge. "We can sit there. No pressure, no misunderstanding." Daniel, the assistant, turned toward the staff, stammering. He's speaking with her perfectly. With Kyoto intonation, Veronica's voice cracked just barely. How do you even know Japanese? I don't think that matters right now, Elliot said gently. Veronica opened her mouth, but Reina Saito, the woman who had said nothing for 15 minutes, raised one hand calmly without breaking eye contact with Elliot. Oyan shie ni gun ete, she said softly. I'll take you up on your offer. And just like that, the most powerful woman in the room left the marble counter and walked beside a janitor toward the quiet lounge. Not a word more was needed. But in that stunned silence, guests and staff alike were left with a new kind of question, one that echoed louder than all the commotion before it. Who is this janitor? And what else has this hotel chosen not to see? Elliot set the delicate porcelain cup on the low table between them, careful not to let the ceramic clink against the saucer. It wasn't just tea, it was ritual, the kind of quiet ceremony he hadn't performed in nearly a decade. Reina Saito sat across from him in the private lounge, her posture regal, hands folded gently in her lap. The soft light filtered through the window, casting patterns across the polished wood floor. Her coat, still damp from the morning drizzle, hung neatly over the armrest beside her. But it wasn't her poise that caught Elliot's attention. It was her restraint. There was power in the way she held stillness, like a violin string tuned tight enough to sing, but not snap. "Arigato," she said softly, eyes lowered. "For speaking with intention." Elliot nodded once. "It's been a while. My accent's probably rusted." "No," she replied. "It's not rust. It's memory." A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but suspended like breath before music. She studied him carefully, her voice now in careful English touched with a Kyoto lilt. "You learned Japanese formally, Kyoto University," Elliot said. 7 years as a cultural linguistics lecturer, specialized in East Asian silence dynamics. Reina raised an eyebrow just slightly. "I wrote my thesis on the phrase Kong Chi Wo Du Mu," he added with a smile. "The art of reading the air." That earned him a whisper of a grin there, and gone like a ripple on still water. "And now, janitor," she said, not with mockery but with genuine curiosity. "Now Janitor Elliot confirmed. At least until someone figures out I know more than where the mops are kept." Reina looked down at the tea and gently blew over the surface. "Why hide?" Elliot leaned back. His voice was quiet. "After my wife passed, I needed a job where no one asked me about my past or my future." Her gaze softened, but she said nothing. He added, "Silence isn't always a retreat. Sometimes it's the only honest thing left." For a moment, Reina looked out the window, her fingers grazing the rim of the teacup. "In my country," she said, "we are taught that the most powerful person in the room is often the one who speaks last." Elliot chuckled. "In this country, the one who speaks loudest usually wins." Reina turned back to him, serious now. "And that is why I stopped speaking English in negotiations. Words have become noise, weapons. Negotiation is supposed to be about intent, but here it's about performance." Elliot watched her with something more than interest. It was recognition. He saw her not as a billionaire but as a human being trying to protect something tender beneath the surface. He knew the feeling. "You're not here to sign a deal," he said finally. "You're here to see who's willing to listen before speaking." Her eyes met his, and he knew he was right. "Back in Tokyo," she said, "an American firm once offered me a partnership. Lavish praise. Smooth talkers. But they mocked my accent when they thought I wasn't listening. They didn't realize I understood every word." "What did you do?" Elliot asked. "I terminated the deal," she replied simply, "and donated the technology to a non-profit instead. Cost me millions." She looked him in the eye. "But I slept better." Elliot smiled, not out of amusement, but admiration. "I hope that keeps you up at night for the right reasons." Raina nodded once, then asked softly, "Do you still teach?" "No," he said. "My students grew up. I didn't." There was something in his tone that stopped her an ache. Quiet, but steady, like grief that had learned how to wear a polite face. Raina glanced towards the hallway where the glass doors of the lounge framed the bustling lobby beyond. "They wanted to call security on me for being quiet." Elliot didn't look. He didn't need to. He already knew the scene. "They were afraid of your silence," he said. "People always are. Silence leaves too much room for truth." Her voice dropped to a whisper, "But you didn't flinch." "I saw your eyes," Elliot said, "not your silence." That made her go still again, not with tension but surprise. A softness crept into her features like someone who'd been carrying a weight for years and suddenly realized they could set it down. She whispered in Japanese almost to herself, "Shizuke-sa Anata no Tetsudai. Silence is your ally." Then she looked up. "Tell me the truth, Elliot Barnes. Why did you come to me?" He paused. And in that pause was everything. "The way they looked at you," he said finally, "like you were the problem, like silence meant ignorance. I've seen that look before. On faces that used to admire me before I lost my title, my voice, my status." Raina tilted her head. "And now, Elliot said, I just mop around the edges and hope someone notices when they step in dirt they tracked in themselves." That made her smile. It was faint, but real. "You noticed me," she said. "I remembered you," he corrected. She blinked. "We've met." "No," he said. "But I remember people like you, people who don't need noise to matter." There was a beat, and then softly, Raina whispered, "Will you stay for a while?" Elliot nodded, and for the first time that day, silence didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like peace. "I want him removed, immediately." Veronica Hale's voice sliced through the hallway like a shard of glass. Her heels struck the marble with clipped, furious precision as she stalked toward the back corridor, the assistant manager trailing behind her like a man hoping to stay employed through sheer silence. "Ma'am," he said. "Careful, the guest specifically requested." "She requested service," Veronica snapped, not even glancing back. She didn't request some glorified janitor in a dusty uniform to perform kabuki theater in the lobby. Inside the executive boardroom, the hotel's upper management sat frozen. The room had just seen a clip 10 seconds long that was now circulating online like wildfire. It showed Elliot Barnes bowing soft-voiced, respectful. And Raina Saito accepting his invitation with grace, the title of the trending video, "The Janitor Who Spoke Her Silence." "Do you know what this makes us look like?" Veronica demanded, slamming her iPad onto the table. "We have 3 certified translators on payroll. None of them could connect with her. And then a janitor for maintenance walks up and makes us look like fools." The regional director coughed lightly. "Veronica, with respect, it doesn't make us look like fools. It reveals that we already were." Her jaw tightened. From the other side of the hotel, in a quiet side hall near the lounge, Elliot stood alone in front of the vending machine, watching the slowly spinning bottle of green tea drop with a clunk. He didn't hear Raina approach until her voice drifted beside him. "That machine is still selling Itoen tea. I haven't seen that brand outside Tokyo in years." Elliot smiled, handed her the bottle. "Well, this place likes to look international. Just don't ask if it's refrigerated." Raina accepted the drink with a soft laugh. Thank you. For earlier, I don't know how else to say it. You already did, Elliot replied. I meant more than just the tea, she said, eyes meeting his. You saved me from becoming someone's spectacle. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I just translated the moment. A pause stretched comfortable. Raina glanced out the tall lobby windows where the city buzzed quietly beyond the glass. I'm used to being underestimated. I even count on it sometimes. But that, woman Veronica, she looked at me like I wasn't even human. Elliot's gaze followed hers. That's the thing about places like this. Polished surfaces, cold smiles. Everything's about what people think you are until you step outside the script. Raina turned back to him. And you, Elliot Barnes. You stepped far outside it. I've been off script for years, he said. She tilted her head. Why? He hesitated, then answered without drama. Because silence became easier than defending the truth. Her brow furrowed slightly. He continued. After my wife died, I had to raise Charlotte, my daughter, alone. I left the university, took whatever job I could, but after a while I realized something. His voice lowered. The world only respects knowledge when it comes in a three-piece suit and a PowerPoint. She said nothing, but the weight of his words settled into her shoulders like something she too had carried. Suddenly, the assistant manager appeared at the end of the hallway, flustered. Mr. Barnes, he said cautiously, Ms. Hale would like to speak with you, urgently. Elliot sighed. Of course she would. Raina stepped forward. Mr. Barnes is currently assisting me. If Ms. Hale wishes to speak with him, she may schedule it after my meeting is complete. The young man blinked. Yes, ma'am. I'll let her know. He turned and practically sprinted off. Raina looked at Elliot amused. I may not raise my voice, but I've learned how to raise eyebrows. That, Elliot said, was a master class. Back in the boardroom, Veronica paced like a shark smelling blood. She's redefining protocol, she hissed. A guest is not supposed to dictate staffing structure, especially when that staff member is maintenance. The PR director spoke up cautiously. Actually, the footage is already being praised online. Words like dignity, grace, and cultural sensitivity are trending. Veronica whirled. Trending doesn't sign our checks. Neither does insulting a billionaire, someone else muttered. She ignored him. Meanwhile, Raina and Elliot returned to the lounge where a tray of traditional sweets had been discreetly placed by a junior staffer who clearly didn't want to be seen. Elliot offered her a manju. Still warm. She took it, smiled. Someone still has pride in service. He sat down across from her again. You said earlier that words had become weapons, but I've always believed they can be bridges too. She nodded. Only if spoken from the right place. He leaned forward slightly. Where do yours come from? Raina blinked. A place I haven't let many visit. He held her gaze. May I be the exception? A moment. No sound, no movement. Then softly she spoke. My father was a Buddhist craftsman. He used to say, in silence we remember who we are. In noise we forget who we were meant to become. Elliot exhaled slowly. That explains a lot. She smiled faintly. I lost him when I was 21. Cancer. But the day before he passed, he held my hand and said, Don't fear being misunderstood. Fear becoming someone easy to understand. Elliot's throat tightened. He would have liked you. Raina looked away for a beat. Sometimes I wonder if he would have recognized me, Elliot said quietly. He would have seen you long before anyone else did. She blinked hard, but didn't let the tears fall. Then, without warning, Veronica Hale entered the lounge. Mr. Barnes, she said sharply, ignoring Raina completely. I need to speak with you, now. Elliot stood slowly. Can it wait, Ms. Saito and I know? Veronica interrupted. This is a matter of professional boundaries. Raina rose beside him. Excuse me, Ms. Hale. Veronica turned fake smile plastered on. Yes, you're addressing an employee who is currently in a private meeting with me. I suggest you choose your next words carefully. Veronica stiffened. I didn't mean to offend. You didn't offend, Raina said calmly. You revealed. And with that, she turned to Elliot. Shall we continue? He nodded. Veronica stood frozen, her face a war of colors, and for the first time it was clear the most powerful person in the room wasn't the one in heels. The tea lounge was quiet. Not hotel quiet, but temple quiet. Muted steps, soft steam rising from delicate porcelain. No phones, no music, just breath. Elliot stood by the table, carefully pouring matcha into 2 small ceramic cups, the deep green liquid swirling gently like a thought just beginning to form. Across from him, Raina Saito sat with her hands resting lightly on her lap, her expression unreadable but softer than it had been in the lobby. It was the first time in years he had performed a tea service properly, and yet his hands didn't shake. Where did you learn this? She asked, voice just above a whisper. In Kyoto, he replied, a teacher named Okabe-san. I was a student. He was everything else. Raina smiled faintly. Was he strict? Worse, Elliot said, offering her a cup. He was gentle, which meant you couldn't blame him when you failed. You just had to get better. She accepted the tea with both hands, her movements precise. That's a very Japanese answer. It stuck, he said. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the tea warm their hands and calm their breath. Then Raina spoke low and deliberate. Everyone assumes silence is passivity, but in my world, it's strategy. Shield. Sword. Elliot nodded. In mine, it became survival. She looked at him closely. What were you surviving? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into his tea like it held the past. Then, my wife died 7 years ago. Sudden aneurysm. One minute we were planning a camping trip. The next I was holding her hand in a hospital room, and she was already gone. Raina didn't speak. She didn't offer condolences. She simply listened. It was the right thing to do. I had just signed a tenure track at a university, Elliot continued. I turned it down. Charlotte was only 3. I couldn't teach linguistic theory while she cried herself to sleep. He smiled bitterly. I thought I was choosing the high road. Turns out no one applauds when a man walks away from prestige to clean floors. Raina tilted her head. That's not weakness. That's discipline. You're the first person who said that without pity, Elliot murmured. I don't offer pity, she said softly. Only recognition. Her voice held something different now, not admiration, but understanding. She set her cup down gently. My silence wasn't always chosen. When I first came to America, I was 22. Bright, naive. I thought intelligence would speak for itself. Elliot watched her, sensing the weight in her posture before she said a word more. A venture capitalist once told me, she continued, "You're impressive for a woman who needs subtitles." Elliot winced. Please tell me you threw something at him. No, Raina said. I tripled my company's valuation the following year and bought his firm. Elliot grinned. Okay, that's better. She looked down, her voice quieter, but it left a scar. After that, I stopped speaking English during negotiations. Not because I couldn't, but because I wanted to see who would try to understand me even when it wasn't easy. Elliot nodded. Like reverse code switching. Exactly, she said. A filter for authenticity. There was another pause. Then Elliot said, So I passed your test. No, Rena replied, meeting his eyes. You never took it. You just showed up as yourself. That line sat heavy between them. Real, unforced, undeniable. He broke the silence with a wry smile. You're not what I expected in a tech billionaire. She raised an eyebrow. And what did you expect? I don't know, he said. Colder, louder, shinier. Rena chuckled. I get that a lot. Elliot sipped his tea. You're human first. That throws people. Rena looked at him, really looked. And you? You're the first person in years who didn't treat me like a headline. He set his cup down. I know what it's like to become invisible in plain sight. That's not something people admit easily. I've had practice, he said. A beat. Then Rena asked, do you ever regret it? Giving up your old life? Elliot hesitated, then said, some nights, yes. When Charlotte asks why I don't wear a suit to work like the other dads at her school. I feel it. He took a breath, but then she hugs me and says, your work smells like lemon cleaner and kindness. And I think maybe that's better than applause. Rena's face softened, the corner of her mouth pulling up. She sounds wise. She's 10, he said, but she sees more clearly than most boardrooms. Rena stood slowly smoothing her skirt. Elliot. I'm not in this city just for a deal. I'm looking for something harder to find than investment capital. He looked up. And what's that? She held his gaze. People who don't perform, just to be seen. Then she turned to leave. But before stepping away, she glanced back and said gently, thank you for reminding me that dignity doesn't need translation. And with that, she left him alone with his tea and a silence that no longer felt like an absence, but an invitation. On the other side of the hotel, behind closed glass doors, Veronica Hale was pacing again. They're still together, she snapped, peering through the security camera feed. Yes, ma'am, a staffer said meekly. Still in the tea lounge. For an hour and 14 minutes, he confirmed. She turned to the hotel's PR manager. This is going to spiral if we don't control the narrative. The narrative, the PR woman said slowly, is that a janitor de-escalated a culturally sensitive crisis with grace and fluency, while the management nearly called security on a billionaire. Veronica's jaw clenched. It's already gone viral, the PR rep added, and guests are asking for Elliot Barnes by name. Veronica's voice dropped cold. He's not a guest. He's not a spokesman. He's not even qualified to clean the penthouse floor. The PR rep raised an eyebrow. And yet, he might be the only person who's making this hotel look human. Veronica's lips thinned into a hard line. She didn't just see a janitor anymore. She saw a threat. The photo hit the internet before Elliot even made it back to the janitor's closet. A grainy snapshot, Rena Saito seated in the tea lounge, smiling softly as Elliot Barnes poured her tea with the precision of a diplomat. No translation device, no assistance, just two people face to face in perfect mutual respect. Within an hour, the image had over 300,000 shares. Within 2, it was trending on Twitter as #TheJanitor.Who.Listened. The caption that went viral came from a guest staying in the hotel who had quietly filmed part of the earlier interaction. While managers panicked, a janitor connected. We don't need more executives, we need more Elliots. Veronica Hale slammed her laptop shut so hard the ceramic cup beside it rattled. Tell me this is being contained, she hissed. The hotel's digital communications lead, a young woman named Jess, swallowed hard. We're trying. But the media's calling. CNN, Nikkei, Asia. Good morning, America. They want to interview him. He's a janitor. Jess didn't respond. But her silence said more than her words ever could. Veronica spun toward the assistant general manager. Do you realize what this means? He hijacked our brand narrative. He made us look like we failed at basic hospitality while he stood there polishing glassware and playing cultural savior. He didn't play anything, the assistant said carefully. He just did the right thing. Veronica turned on him. No one hired him to be the right thing. We hired him to mop. And then, in the pause that followed, she said the part no one dared to say out loud. If this gets out of hand, we'll become the hotel where a janitor outshone management. And that is not the kind of publicity that preserves executive bonuses. Elliot stood alone in the staff break room, the buzz of the fluorescent light humming above him like a tired engine. In his hand was a printed email from corporate HR. Short, blunt, sterile. Subject: re-employee. Conduct review, Mr. Barnes. Due to recent public exposure and deviation from assigned duties, a formal internal review has been initiated. Until the matter is resolved, please refrain from further guest interaction beyond your cleaning responsibilities. Regards, Staff Oversight Committee. He folded the paper once, then again, until it was small enough to disappear in his fist. Should have seen that coming, he murmured. The door creaked behind him. It was Marcus, the night concierge, one of the few staff who still remembered that Elliot once wore a blazer instead of a name badge. They're panicking, Marcus said quietly. Veronica's about to lose it. Tagliata didn't turn around. Because I spoke Japanese to a guest. No, Marcus replied. Because you reminded everyone what real service looks like. There was a silence between them, an old one, heavy with everything they'd seen over years of invisible labor. You okay? Marcus asked. I'm fine, Elliot lied. Marcus stepped forward. You've got people pulling for you, Elliot. Guests are asking for you by name. Staff are whispering about you like you're some kind of legend. I'm not a legend, Elliot said flatly. I'm a man with a mop who forgot to keep his head down. Marcus lowered his voice. Or maybe you're a man who remembered he still had a voice. Elliot's jaw tensed. Doesn't matter. HR wants silence. Again. Marcus stepped back. For what it's worth. She saw you. Miss Saito. I think she saw all of you. Elliot looked down at the folded paper, then nodded. That's the part that scares them most. Back upstairs in the penthouse conference suite, Raina sat by the window with her laptop open. Her assistant, Daniel, paced nervously behind her. They've sent a statement, he said, waving his phone. From corporate. They're calling the incident an unfortunate deviation from protocol. They say Mr. Barnes acted outside his station. Raina didn't look up. They're trying to minimize it, Daniel added. Still no reaction. He hesitated. Do you want me to respond? She finally turned. Her voice was soft but unshakable. No, no, her eyes sharpened. I'll respond in person. Daniel blinked. You mean I'm going back down there? Raina said. He hesitated. They're going to push back. She looked him in the eye. Then let them. I didn't build $1 billion company to let people like Veronica Hale define who matters and who doesn't. Daniel straightened. Understood. As she closed her laptop, her reflection in the screen stared back at her. Not the billionaire, not the figurehead, but the girl who once waited tables in a Kyoto tea house, translating tourists' awkward orders into graceful phrases her grandmother had taught her. That girl had waited a long time to be heard. And now she was speaking. Elliot returned to the lobby with a mop in his hand and silence in his chest. The chatter in the hotel hadn't stopped. If anything, it had grown louder, so much so that guests turned to look at him now. Not with disdain, but with curiosity, with respect. He hated it, because he knew how fragile that respect was. Respect, built on viral clips and trending hashtags, wasn't real. It was applause with a time limit. Veronica met him near the elevators, arms crossed like a general waiting for a soldier to surrender. "Mr. Barnes," she said crisply, "I trust you've received the notice." "I did." "Then you understand the consequences of continued deviation." "I do." She smiled thinly. "Good. Then we won't have any more confusion about roles, will we?" But just as Elliot was about to nod and walk away, a voice echoed behind them. "No, we will have clarity, but not the kind you think." They both turned. Reina Saito stood at the far end of the corridor, poised and resolute. She walked toward them, each step deliberate, as if she were stepping onto a stage she owned completely. "Miss Saito Veronica," said Mask, slipping into place. "We were just discussing the unfortunate misunderstanding earlier." "There was no misunderstanding," Reina interrupted calmly. "Only a failure of character." Veronica blinked. "Excuse me." Reina's voice remained steady. "You mistook silence for weakness, and you mistook uniform for worth." Veronica flushed. "This is an internal staff matter." "Incorrect," Reina said, holding her gaze. "This is a matter of human dignity." She turned to Elliot. "Mr. Barnes, would you walk with me?" He hesitated, then nodded, leaving the mop by the wall. As they walked down the hallway side by side, Reina said quietly, "They can't stand that you didn't beg for credit." Elliot smiled faintly. "Let them stew. I didn't do it for them." "I know," she replied. "That's what makes it powerful." They walked in silence. But it was the kind of silence that didn't shrink a man. It lifted him. It was nearly midnight when Elliot finally walked through the door of his modest apartment. The lights in the kitchen were still on, casting a soft golden hue over the worn countertop and the small stack of dishes in the sink. The scent of lavender and lemon lingered faintly. Charlotte had cleaned up again without being asked. She was always trying to take care of him. "Too much for a 10-year-old. Dad." Her voice called from the bedroom. "Not sleepy, waiting. I'm home," he answered gently. Charlotte appeared a moment later in the hallway, wrapped in her favorite blanket, hair tousled, eyes sharp. "You were on the internet," she said flatly. Elliot blinked. "I was what Lily showed me. Her mom watches the news during dinner. You're everywhere." He sighed, sitting down on the old blue couch. "Yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen." She patted over and sat beside him, curling up like a cat. "They're saying you spoke Japanese to a billionaire and saved the hotel," she said, looking up at him. "Is that true?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "Do you remember when I told you that sometimes doing the right thing makes the wrong people angry?" She nodded. "Well," he said, "today was one of those days." Charlotte was quiet for a while. "Then are they going to fire you?" The question hit harder than it should have, but Elliot didn't flinch. "I don't know yet," he said. She leaned her head against his arm. "Why do people get mad when someone's kind?" He stared at the floor. "Because kindness makes arrogance feel small." She tilted her head. "But that's not your fault." "No," he whispered. "But it makes me the nearest target." A long silence stretched between them. Then, almost like a whisper, Charlotte asked, "Is being good always this hard?" Elliot's throat tightened. He kissed the top of her head. "Yes, but it's also what makes you strong." Later that night, when she was asleep, Elliot sat alone at the kitchen table, a cup of cold tea by his elbow and a pen in his hand. He pulled out a sheet of paper, real paper, and began to write. Slowly, thoughtfully, "Charlotte, one day you'll be old enough to ask me not just what I did, but why I did it. I want to answer that question now while the memory still stings and the truth is still warm. When people talk about courage, they usually picture someone loud, bold, demanding. But what I've learned is that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to stay kind in a room that expects you to harden." Today, I saw a woman being erased with smiles. I've seen that look before when someone pretends you're not there because acknowledging you would mean they have to treat you like a human being. I stepped forward because I've been on the receiving end of that silence too many times. And if I've learned anything from raising you, it's this: we don't need the world's permission to do what's right. We just need the will to do it anyway. You once told me that my work smells like lemon and kindness. I hope it always does. Love, Dad. He folded the letter and tucked it into a small envelope marked with her name. One day, she would need it. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for years. But when the world tried to convince her that being quiet meant being small, she would remember that her father changed a room by saying almost nothing and meaning everything. The next morning, Elliot arrived at the hotel earlier than usual. He needed the silence. Before the lobby filled with clacking heels and eager bellboys before the emails and HR meetings and hallway whispers. He stepped into the janitor's closet and opened his locker. Inside, taped to the door, was a photo of Charlotte at age 6, missing front teeth, chocolate on her cheek, holding a handmade Best Dad Ever award scribbled in crayon. He smiled, then reached for his mop. Just as he stepped into the hallway, Marcus caught up with him. "Hey, Marcus," said Breath Short. "They're meeting right now. Executive board. Whole 9 yards. I heard they've called corporate." Elliot sighed. "I figured." "You okay?" "I will be," he said. "What about Raina?" "She's still in the penthouse," Marcus replied. "But she's quiet, focused, like she's planning something bigger than all of us." Elliot nodded. "That wouldn't surprise me." Marcus lowered his voice. "You're not alone, man. Everyone down here, we're behind you. Maintenance, housekeeping, kitchen. You gave us something none of us had in years. What's that?" Marcus looked him dead in the eye. Proof we mattered. Upstairs in the boardroom, Veronica Hale stood at the head of the table surrounded by department heads and senior partners. "This has gone far enough," she said, voice clipped and cold. "Mr. Barnes' behavior, however well-intentioned, has created a disruptive narrative. We need to reassert control over the hotel's brand before this becomes a precedent." The room shifted uncomfortably. One executive cleared his throat. "With respect, Veronica. The guest in question has not filed any complaint. In fact, she's praised his conduct publicly." Another added, "And bookings have increased 12% since yesterday. We're receiving emails from international clients asking if Mr. Barnes still works here." Veronica's lips thinned. "We cannot run a luxury establishment on sentiment." Just then, the door opened, and Raina Saito stepped in. Without a word, she walked to the center of the room and placed her phone on the table. A voice recording began to play Veronica's voice from the lobby the previous day. "This is America. If you want service here, speak English. We don't have time for guessing games and silent treatment. We didn't hire staff to perform kabuki theater for billionaires." Silence. Then Raina turned off the recording and looked up. "I gave you a chance to correct the record," she said evenly. "You chose to pretend nothing happened." Veronica stammered. "You recorded that without my—" "You were in a public space," Raina said, "surrounded by witnesses, including your own staff." She turned to the executives. "I came here to evaluate this hotel as a long-term partner for our tech summit, but what I found was a culture of assumption, and one man brave enough to speak humanity into a room full of protocol." She paused. "I will not cancel the summit, but I will attach my company's name only to institutions that recognize value beyond a title." And then she said 5 words that changed everything. "Elliot Barnes is that standard." The ballroom at Royal Grand had never been this full. Not during holiday galas, not during celebrity weddings, and certainly not for a press conference called by a billionaire who refused to say why. Rows of media cameras lined the velvet rope. Reporters whispered, shifting in their seats, unsure of what they were about to witness. The podium stood empty. No sponsor banners, no scripted background, just a single line projected behind it in white letters against black. Sometimes silence is the loudest truth. Backstage, Elliot adjusted the stiff collar of his freshly laundered shirt. Still no tie, still no suit. He'd refused both. He wasn't here to play a role. He was here because Reina Saito had asked him one simple question that morning. Would you stand beside me, not as a symbol, but as yourself? Now she stood beside him as calm as ever, adjusting the sleeves of her ivory blazer with elegant precision. You don't need to speak, Reina said quietly. I want to, Elliot replied. She looked at him. You don't owe them anything, I know, he said, but maybe they need to hear it anyway. Reina nodded once, then stepped onto the stage. The flashes started immediately. She walked with the deliberate grace of someone who knew exactly who she was and who no longer needed to prove it. She reached the podium, looked over the crowd, and said nothing. 30 seconds passed, then 60. Reporters exchanged glances. Was there a technical issue? But Reina just stood there, her silence like stone. Then she bowed deeply. Not a casual nod. A full, reverent Japanese bow, kei style, reserved for moments of solemn gratitude or apology. Gasps fluttered through the room like leaves in wind. Then she stepped aside. Elliot walked up to the podium slowly, like every footstep had to earn its right. He looked out at the crowd. No notes, no teleprompter, just a man in work shoes standing under hot lights trying to speak for every person who had ever been seen last, if at all. My name is Elliot Barnes, he said, voice steady. I clean floors for a living. A few murmurs, pens scratched paper. I used to teach languages, studied silence. Then life happened, and silence became my job description. Soft laughter in the back. He continued. Yesterday, I watched someone powerful get dismissed not because she was wrong, but because she refused to perform on someone else's terms. I've been on that end of things. Some of you have too. A hush fell. I didn't step forward because I was brave, he said. I stepped forward because I recognized the look in her eyes. He looked over at Reina, that look we get. When the world tells us we don't belong in rooms we paid to enter, someone in the audience clapped once. Then a few more joined. Then the room grew still again, listening. I didn't offer a statement. I offered a cup of tea. I spoke her language not to impress her, but to remind her she wasn't alone. Elliot took a breath, and in return she reminded me I still had a voice. He stepped back from the microphone, and Reina stepped forward once more. This time she spoke, in flawless English. I have done 100 interviews in my career, she began. Every time I'm expected to smile, to pitch to please, but not today. She scanned the room. Today, I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as a woman who watched a man with a mop do what a room full of experts could not. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't tremble, but it carried like thunder wrapped in silk. He didn't see a language barrier, he saw me. Reina paused, then held up a small photo, the now famous image of Elliot bowing slightly as he offered her tea. This photo has been shared over 12 million times, she said. But what matters isn't the image, it's what you didn't see. She looked at the reporters, her voice sharpening just slightly. You didn't see how many people rolled their eyes when I chose silence. You didn't see the smirks, the dismissals, the measured cruelty wrapped in customer service smiles. She lowered the photo, and you didn't see Elliot's hand tremble when he bowed, because it didn't. He met my silence with strength, not fear. That is the kind of leadership I want in every boardroom I walk into. Applause broke out this time, louder rising, spreading like a tide. Raina waited until it softened, then looked out once more. "There's one last thing I'd like to share," she said. "Something I've never said on any stage." She turned slightly, looking at Elliot. "Mr. Barnes, would you allow me to read something?" He nodded, unsure. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a piece of paper. "Charlotte, one day you'll be old enough to ask me not just what I did, but why I did it. We don't need the world's permission to do what's right. We just need the will to do it anyway." A silence fell that no one dared break. Elliot's chest tightened. She looked at him again, her eyes warm. "She's lucky to have you," he swallowed. "I'm the lucky one." The press conference ended not with a slogan, not with a marketing spin, but with two people bowing to each other. And in that room of power suits and camera flashes, dignity stood taller than branding. Hours later, in a small cafe 2 blocks from the hotel, Elliot and Raina sat side by side, no cameras, no audience. Just tea. She glanced at him over the rim of her cup. "You didn't have to let me read that letter, I know," he said, "but maybe the world needed to know I'm not just a janitor." "You never were," she said quietly. "You just stopped correcting them." He smiled. "Will you go back?" she asked. "To teaching?" He looked down. "I don't know. The world feels different now," maybe, Raina said softly. "The world just finally caught up to who you've always been." They sat in silence for a long time, and for once it wasn't the kind of silence that hides pain. It was the kind that follows truth, the kind that lingers because something real had been said. The elevator inside Whitaker Tower barely made a sound. No ding, no lurch, just a smooth, sterile glide to the 42nd floor. Elliot stood alone inside his reflection multiplying in the mirrored walls. He'd swapped his usual work shirt for a clean button-up and an old corduroy jacket that still smelled faintly of his wife's favorite cologne. He hadn't worn it in years. The doors opened. A receptionist gestured without speaking. The entire office gleamed like a jewelry box, glass chrome silence. Elliot stepped into the lion's den. Raina was waiting in a private conference room backlit by a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked half the city. She didn't rise when he entered. No handshake, no smile. "You asked to see me," she said, folding her hands on the table. Elliot nodded and sat. "I figured, if you're going to put your name on me, you should at least know mine." She tilted her head. "Go on." "My name is Elliot Barnes. Former linguistics teacher. Father, widower, current janitor, temporary internet meme." She didn't laugh. "Why did you agree to speak for me?" "Because silence isn't the absence of words," he said. "It's the presence of meaning, and what you did that conference. It meant something." A flicker crossed her face, but she hid it fast. "You went viral," she said. Tone clipped. "Do you know what that means?" "I know what it feels like," Elliot replied. "Feels like being lit up for 10 seconds, then tossed back into darkness with your eyes still adjusting." Raina's expression cracked just a hairline fracture, but enough. "I know what they're saying," she said. "I've heard the backlash. The board's watching me like a malfunctioning asset." He leaned in. "Is that what you think this is, a brand crisis?" "No," she said flatly. "I think it's a mirror." That gave Elliot pause. Raina continued. "People didn't applaud because I said something profound. They applauded because you did something inconveniently decent. You reminded them of a humanity they've learned to ignore." Elliot met her gaze. "And that scares them." "No," she said. "That shames them." They sat in silence. Then Raina broke it. "There's something I haven't told anyone." Her voice had dropped half an octave. I was 6 the first time I refused to speak. Elliot didn't move. I was sent to an elite prep school in Tokyo. I didn't understand a word anyone said for the first month. I tried. God, I tried, but every time I opened my mouth, I heard my difference echo back at me. The teachers praised my silence, called it discipline. I just stopped trying. She looked down. That silence followed me to Harvard, to boardrooms, to bedrooms. I learned to use it as armor. Elliot's voice was gentle, but armor gets heavy. She nodded, and lonely. Why, tell me this, he asked. Because I remember your wife. His heart skipped. What, years ago? She used to teach English at the community center on Mott Street, right? Elliot blinked. Yes. Raina's eyes softened. I was 19, alone, just arrived from Japan. No confidence, barely any vocabulary. I was placed in her class. Elliot's throat tightened. Emma Raina nodded. She wore cherry blossom earrings, always had a thermos of miso soup, and she never made me feel stupid. Elliot couldn't speak. She asked us once to write a letter to our future selves, Raina said. I wrote, "One day I want to be a woman who speaks truth without needing volume." She looked at him. You were married to her. Elliot's hands trembled in his lap. She changed my life, Raina said. But I never got to thank her. She disappeared from the center. They said she got sick. Elliot whispered, leukemia. 6 months from diagnosis to... He trailed off. I'm sorry, Raina said quietly. Truly. A long silence stretched between them, and for once it wasn't empty. Elliot leaned back. You remembered her all this time. She taught me my first sentence in English. I ever loved, Raina said. What was it? She smiled faintly. Your voice matters even when it's quiet. He nodded, swallowing thick emotion. She'd be proud of you, Raina added, of what you did, of who you are. Not sure I've lived up to that. You have, she said. You lived long enough to echo her impact. That stopped him cold, because it was true. As he left the tower, Raina walked him to the elevator. At the door, she hesitated. I want to offer you a job, she said, not as a janitor, as a consultant for internal ethics and communication training. You understand what real dignity looks like. I want that in my company. He blinked. You serious? I'm rarely anything else. Elliot exhaled slowly. I'll think about it. I hope you do, she said. As the doors began to close, she added softly, Tell Charlotte her mother was unforgettable. The doors sealed shut, and Elliot stood there alone, descending only. This time, he didn't feel like he was going down. He felt like he was rising. That evening, back in his modest apartment, Elliot opened the drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was the envelope. Charlotte's letter to her mother never mailed, written in crayon. He unfolded it. Dear Mommy, Daddy says you're in the sky. I wish you could come back. I want to show you my drawing of our family. You, me, and Daddy cleaning the stars. Elliot pressed it to his chest, then slowly reached for a pen. He turned the paper over and began to write. The wind whispered through the Whitaker courtyard, rattling the leaves like pages being turned. Elliot stood beneath the cherry tree, holding Charlotte's backpack. His hands were still, but his heart wasn't. Today was her first official speech therapy session. Inside the towering glass building, the world of power suits and polished words churned on. But Elliot wasn't thinking about boardrooms or viral fame. He was thinking about his daughter, his soft-spoken, fierce-eyed girl, who had taught him more about courage than anyone else. She's waiting for you, Raina said, stepping beside him. Elliot turned startled. Raina wasn't in a blazer today, just a soft navy sweater and jeans, her hair in a low ponytail. She looked lighter. She asked if you'd sit in, she added. He blinked. She said, Dad talks like the sky listens. I figured that meant something. Elliot smiled. She always says things sideways, but they land right where they need to. They entered the small therapy room. It wasn't clinical, it was warm. Rugs, beanbags, books arranged like rainbow spines. Charlotte sat cross-legged on the floor facing Dr. Allen, the speech therapist. Her fingers were wrapped around a plush rabbit. Raina sat quietly in the corner, more mother now than mogul. Dr. Allen smiled gently. Hi, Charlotte. Do you want to try again today? Charlotte looked up at Elliot. He nodded. Only if you want to, sweetheart. A beat passed. Then she whispered something almost inaudible, but Dr. Allen caught it. Did you say, okay? Charlotte nodded. The room held its breath. Dr. Allen smiled. Let's play the color game. I'll hold up a card and you name the color when you're ready. One by one the cards appeared. Red, green, yellow. Charlotte remained silent, but then came the blue card. Charlotte blinked, and softly, so softly it came. Sky, not blue. Sky. Elliot felt his lungs forget how to work. Raina's eyes shone. Dr. Allen's face lit up like sunrise. That's right, the therapist said gently. The sky is blue. Charlotte's fingers tightened around the rabbit. Do you want to try another? Charlotte didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward Raina and whispered, I saw you cry. Raina froze. Silence flooded the room. Charlotte tilted her head. You were holding the locket. Elliot tensed. Raina whispered, Yes, I was. My mom had one too, Charlotte said, but hers was broken. Raina's voice shook. Did it have cherry blossoms? Charlotte nodded. Raina looked at Elliot. He stared back, stunned. She gave it to me when I was little, Charlotte added. She said, when people miss each other, the flowers remember. The room held still as if afraid any sound might snap the fragile moment. Raina rose and knelt beside her. Your mother was my teacher, a long time ago. I didn't know you were her daughter until recently. Charlotte blinked. Did she teach you words? No, Raina said. She taught me silence, the kind that holds meaning. A tear slid down Charlotte's cheek. I miss her. Raina reached into her pocket and pulled out her locket. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a faded photo, Emma's warm smile. Charlotte gasped. I have the other half, she said. Elliot sank into a chair. Emma gave her half to Charlotte before she passed. Said one day someone would return the other piece. Raina looked at him. She knew. She always knew more than she let on. Charlotte reached into her backpack, pulled out her locket, and handed it to Raina. The two halves clicked together like a whisper of destiny, and the room exhaled. That night, Raina invited them over. Not to her penthouse, to her real home. A modest, craftsman-style house tucked in a quiet corner of the city, shaded by sycamore trees and lined with wind chimes. It was the first time Elliot saw her without a city skyline behind her. She opened the door herself, barefoot. No staff, she said. Just us. Charlotte clutched her hand as they walked in. Elliot noticed the walls were bare, not cold, just waiting. You don't have any pictures, Charlotte said. Raina paused. I used to think silence meant strength, but now I think maybe I was just afraid of echoes. Then let's make new ones, Elliot said. Over dinner, the conversation flowed soft, steady, real. They talked about favorite childhood books, about words they liked and couldn't explain why, about the first time Raina ever laughed until she cried, about how Elliot once sang a lullaby to distract Charlotte during a power outage and ended up being recorded by a neighbor and turned into a meme. She fell asleep halfway through. Elliot chuckled. Didn't even hear the second verse. She wasn't sleeping, Charlotte said. I just didn't want it to stop. That silenced everyone for all the right reasons. Raina looked at Elliot. You know, she said softly, when I lost my voice as a child, it didn't happen overnight. It chipped away piece by piece until silence felt safer than being misunderstood. He nodded. And now she met his eyes. Now I think, maybe healing doesn't always look like sound. Sometimes it looks like being heard. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Later, as he tucked Charlotte into the guest bed, she looked up at him. Yeah, love, do you think Mommy can see us right now? Elliot smiled gently. I think she never stopped. Charlotte curled into her pillow. Then I hope she sees I gave her locket back. I think it was waiting for Miss Raina. Elliot brushed her hair back. I think you're right. Dad, yes, do you think Raina could be part of our family one day? Elliot paused, then kissed her forehead. Sometimes, he whispered, families are built from pieces that remember where they belong. Charlotte smiled with her eyes closed. Like cherry blossoms, he whispered. Exactly like that. Outside, Raina stood by the window staring at the stars. Elliot joined her, both quiet. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I haven't been this scared in years. He raised an eyebrow. Scared? She turned to him, of feeling something real, and wanting to keep it. He took her hand again. Then let's keep it slow, he said, but not silent. She smiled. Deal. You didn't tell me the whole story, did you? Elliot's voice was soft, but the silence that followed was heavier than glass. He stood by the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing a teacup Charlotte had used earlier. His back was to Raina, but she could feel his gaze even without seeing it. Raina leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms folded across her chest. Which part do you mean? The part where you stopped believing you deserved to be loved? She didn't flinch, but something shifted in her eyes. I've seen people wear power like armor, he continued. But you wear it like punishment. That struck something deep. She moved slowly into the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. I never wanted to be that girl who waited for someone to save her. You're not, Elliot said, setting the cup down. You're the girl who taught herself how to fly, but forgot what it feels like to land. Raina didn't answer, not with words. But after a moment she sat down at the kitchen table and whispered, Do you know why I hired you that day? Elliot dried his hands. Because I spilled sanitizer on your assistant's designer heels and didn't blink. She laughed a little. Because you looked me in the eyes. Like I wasn't a headline or a net worth or a scandal waiting to happen. Raina, he said gently, sitting across from her. I was drowning in silence, Elliot. Not the kind outside, but the one inside your own chest. You think I helped Charlotte? She's the one who reminded me that some things are worth saying even if your voice shakes. Elliot smiled faintly. She gets that from her mom. Raina hesitated. And do you ever miss her? Every day, he replied without hesitation. But missing doesn't mean I'm stuck. It just means I loved well. She looked at him, her eyes glassy. How do you love again after losing something that defined you? You don't, he said. You don't love again. You just love differently. The heart doesn't have a limit. It just expands. Raina lowered her gaze. I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. But I'm more scared of going through life untouched. The clock ticked. Then softly she reached across the table and touched his fingers. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a grand gesture. But it was real. A few days later, Raina stepped onto the stage of the East Coast Women in Leadership Summit. Cameras flashed. People murmured. She was scheduled to close the day with her keynote, something her PR team had carefully crafted for weeks. But as she stood at the podium looking out into the sea of sharp suits and curious eyes, she went off script. Today, she began, I was supposed to talk about market trends, sustainable growth, and how to build resilient teams. But I'm going to talk about silence. People shifted in their seats. Silence, she said, isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's a cage. I know because I lived there for a long time. I built companies, empires, boardrooms, but never let anyone close enough to know what scared me at night. Elliot, seated in the back, sat up straighter. She continued, her voice steady but raw. A little girl once reminded me that even the quietest voices have a song inside them. And a janitor once taught me that healing doesn't come with titles, it comes with kindness, consistency, and the courage to stay even when you're uncomfortable. The audience held its breath. I lost my voice long before I ever gained the spotlight, Raina said. But lately, I've been learning. It's never too late to start speaking again. She paused, smiled, and stepped back. The applause was thunderous, not polite, not performative. It was real. Later that night, Raina found Elliot waiting outside the back entrance holding 2 paper cups of cocoa. I figured you'd be dehydrated from all that honesty, he joked. She took the cup with a smirk. You watched the whole thing. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Besides, I was hoping you'd mention janitors. She nudged his shoulder. You're more than that, you know. Am I? You're the man who walked into my silence and made it less lonely. They sipped their cocoa under the city lights, street lamps casting golden halos on the pavement. After a quiet moment, Raina turned to him. There's something I haven't told you. Elliot raised an eyebrow. My father didn't just leave, she said. He left because of me. His expression softened. Raina, no, listen, she insisted, her voice cracking. He told me once that I was too much, too loud, too emotional, that I scared him, and when he left, I believed it. For years. Elliot set his cocoa down on the hood of her car, then he took her shoulders in his hands firmly but gently. You are not too much. You were just too bright for people still living in shadows. She tried to blink away the tears. Raina, you scare people because you see through them, because you feel, and because somewhere along the way you forgot that being seen is a gift, not a flaw. I don't know how to believe that. That's okay, he whispered. I'll believe it for both of us until you can. That broke her, not in a bad way, but like spring breaking through winter. She stepped forward and he wrapped his arms around her, not as a savior, but as someone who knew exactly what it felt like to rebuild something from the ashes. Back at home, Charlotte watched from the upstairs window. She didn't say anything, just hugged her rabbit a little tighter, and whispered, Told you, Mama. He found her. Later that evening, Raina and Elliot sat on her living room floor with Charlotte between them building a puzzle together. No big announcements, no grand plans. Just laughter, small stories, and pieces slowly finding where they belonged. Charlotte asked, pointing at one corner piece. Do you think every puzzle has only one way to fit? He paused, then smiled. The pieces do, but sometimes you don't know where they go, until you see the bigger picture. Raina met his eyes across the coffee table, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. It was a quiet Saturday morning in early spring, the kind of morning where everything felt paused, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something gentle to arrive. Raina stood barefoot in the sun-dappled kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The light filtered in through the window, painting golden streaks across her silk robe. Her hair was still tousled from sleep, and yet she looked more at peace than she ever had. Elliot was at the stove humming something under his breath as he flipped pancakes badly. Charlotte sat on the counter, one leg swinging, her eyes wide as she concentrated on sprinkling blueberries with surgical precision. "Careful," Elliot said, glancing at her. "That's pancake art. We're making memories here." Charlotte grinned. "I'm making a bunny. This one's Mama." Raina laughed softly. "Why does my pancake have bunny ears?" "Because you're the bravest," Charlotte replied with the authority only a child could muster. "And brave people have ears for listening to scared hearts." Raina blinked. That one landed deep. Elliot looked over his shoulder and gave Raina a knowing smile. "I told you kid's been reading your soul since day one." Later that afternoon, they visited the park where Charlotte first gave Raina a flower the very first day Raina had learned what love could sound like when words weren't enough. This time, Raina brought the flower. She handed it to Charlotte as they sat beneath the blooming cherry blossom trees. "This is for you," Raina said. Charlotte tilted her head. "Why?" "Because you reminded me that love isn't perfect. It's just patient." Charlotte ran her fingers along the petals. "Does that mean you'll stay even when I'm mad or quiet again?" Raina nodded. "Especially then." Charlotte leaned her head against Raina's shoulder. "You didn't run when I was broken. You helped me remember the colors." Elliot watched them from a distance, his heart full. In that moment, he didn't see the CEO or the silent little girl. He saw the family they had built, one heartbeat at a time. That evening, the three of them sat on the floor in Raina's art room, now repurposed as a cozy space full of books, soft lighting, and a wall full of Charlotte's crayon masterpieces. A blank canvas sat before them. Raina handed Charlotte a brush. "Your turn to start." Charlotte hesitated. "What should I paint?" "Anything." Elliot said, "What does this family look like to you?" Charlotte dipped her brush in yellow and painted a small sun in the corner. "Sunshine?" Raina asked. Charlotte shook her head. "That's Elliot. He's always warm even when it rains." Raina smiled. "And what about me?" Charlotte drew a large tree, steady, full grounding everything on the page. "You're the roots," she said. "You keep us strong." "And you?" Elliot asked. Charlotte paused. Then carefully in the center of the canvas she painted a heart. "I'm the space, in between," she whispered. "The quiet part, but it's still love." Raina felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She reached out, brushing a lock of hair behind Charlotte's ear. "You're not the quiet part anymore, sweetheart. You're the voice that taught us all how to listen." The following week, Raina published a children's book. Not under her company's brand, not under her name as CEO. Just as Raina and Charlotte Whitaker. The book was titled The Girl Who Drew Silence, a simple, poignant tale of a girl who didn't speak but painted the world with colors no one else could see. The final page read, "She never needed to shout. Her love was loud enough." It became a quiet bestseller passed between parents and teachers, therapists, and foster homes. Not because it was flashy, but because it was true. People began reaching out. Letters came in. Messages from mothers, from daughters, from grown men who hadn't spoken to their children in years. One note said, "I thought my son was unreachable. Until I realized he wasn't silent, I just wasn't listening the right way." Months later, on a cool evening in June, Raina, Elliot, and Charlotte stood together in a modest backyard filled with fairy lights and laughter. It wasn't a grand wedding, just a gathering of a few close friends, Charlotte in a pale pink dress carrying a basket of rose petals. When Elliot turned to Raina, his voice caught. "You know, he said for a woman who built a business empire, it took you long enough to let someone love you." She raised an eyebrow, her smile soft. "For a janitor with a mop and a heart of gold, you're surprisingly patient." They both laughed. Then Raina leaned in and whispered so only he could hear, "Thank you for never trying to fix me, just for standing still until I could find my way back." And when they exchanged vows, they didn't promise perfection. They promised presence. They promised to speak the truth even when it trembled. They promised to listen even when there were no words. Charlotte cheered as they kissed. Then she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama found her voice." That night, under the stars, Raina stood beside Elliot in the yard watching Charlotte chase fireflies barefoot. Did you ever think she said that a spilled bucket in a hallway would lead to all this? Elliot slipped an arm around her waist. I've stopped being surprised by what happens when people stay. She looked at him. And you? What are you still searching for? He smiled. Honestly, I think I found it. It wasn't a place or a plan. It was this, us. She leaned her head against his shoulder. They stood in silence, not the heavy kind, but the kind that fills you. And in that quiet, Raina finally understood something. The deepest connections don't always need a voice. Sometimes love is the language that speaks when everything else falls away. And just like that, a janitor, a silent girl, and a woman who had forgotten how to feel found their way home. Sometimes it takes just one act of kindness. One person who chooses to stay, and a quiet love that refuses to give up to change everything. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We read every one of them. And tell us which part of the story stayed with you the most. If you believe the world needs more stories like this filled with healing hope and humanity, please hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next journey. New stories are coming soon, and we'd love to have you with us. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care of your heart and never stop believing in second chances.